Hi everyone, I hope you guys are having a great day and a great week. If this is your first training with me, my name is Jenny Hoskins and I am a certified positive discipline educator and creator of the Peaceful Parenting Method. And in today's training, I am going to be talking about how to stay calm when disciplining your child. And before I jump into this training, I want to talk about two concepts that I think are really going to help you grasp this training and get the most out of this training. So the first two concepts that I want to talk about are, number one, this idea of CoEssentialism, and number two, division of responsibility. And although these might sound like really complicated, esoteric terms, they're actually pretty straightforward, and they're things that we come across every day, moment by moment in our daily lives. So the first concept I want to start with is this idea of CoEssentialism, and it's exactly how it sounds. Basically, with regards to you and your child, if we're talking about parenting, but really this can apply to any relationship, but with regards to parenting, because this is a parenting training, it basically means that you and your child are both essential elements in the equation. Okay, so you yourself are part of the equation and your child is part of the equation, and you have to look at both sides of the equation. Okay, and then the next part that I want to talk about is this idea of division of responsibility, meaning you have your responsibility as the parent, and then your child has their responsibility as well, which is going to vary depending on their age, their maturity, where they are in their development, and then you as the parent are going to help them understand what their responsibility is, and you're going to guide them and direct them until they get to be of a level of maturity where they can start to self-regulate and be responsible for their side of the equation. Okay, but today's training, I want to talk about just your side of the equation, because this is really where your source of power is. Like I said, both sides are essential, and we are going to talk about your child side of the equation in upcoming trainings, but for today's training, we're just going to be talking about your side of the equation, because that is where your source of power is. And before I dive in, I want to share a story with you. This is a parable, and I absolutely love this parable. I think it's a great analogy and story that we can apply to all areas of our life, and especially in relationships, and for you in your parenting journey, I think it's going to be very helpful. So this is a parable. It's called the parable of the coffee bean, the egg, and the potato. And so there's a story about a dad and his daughter. And this dad's daughter was just complaining all the time. She said nothing was going right in her life. Everything was a drag. It was like one problem after the other. And the dad was listening to his daughter, and he decided that he was going to use this as a teaching opportunity. And so he took his daughter into the kitchen and he filled up 3 pots of water. And in one pot, he put a coffee bean, and in the other pot, he put an egg, and in the third pot, he put a potato. And then he turned on the burners and he let the water boil for about 20 minutes. And after they had boiled for about 20 minutes, he looked at his daughter and he said, "What do you see?" And she's like, "Well, I see an egg, coffee bean, and a potato." And he said, "No, look closer." And so she poked the egg and she noticed that it had become hardened. And then she poked the potato and she noticed that it had become softened. But then she looked at the coffee bean and she smelt its rich aroma, and she saw that the coffee bean had literally transformed its environment. And he said, "You see, each one of these things experienced the same adversity, the boiling water, but each of them handled them differently. the egg had become hardened, the potato had become softened, and the coffee bean had literally transformed his environment. And so he said, so it is in life. Whenever we have an adversity, whenever you have a challenge or a struggle or whatever it is, we always have a choice in how we react or respond to that. So are we going to become hardened? Are we going to become softened? Or are we going to literally transform our relationship? And this is a concept that I want you to realize as parents, is that you always have a choice in a situation, even though it might not always seem like it, especially when your child is having a major meltdown, or you're in a power struggle with your child, or they're not listening. But you always have a choice in that moment of how you're going to respond to that. And one of the things that you can do to make sure that you are responding instead of reacting is to become aware of your triggers. And this is something that everybody has. It's not a bad thing. It's just part of life, right? Kids trigger us. They do things that are just like, we don't understand. It doesn't make sense. It's incredibly disrespectful. And what might trigger one adult might not trigger another. But the simple fact is, kids are going to do things that trigger us. And so we need to become aware of what those triggers are. Also, what are our fears? What are our projections? What are our belief systems? And how are those elements impacting our response to what our child is doing, or what any child is doing, right? So once you become aware of those triggers, then you can really start to manage them in a way that you are responding versus reacting to your child. And so the first thing is awareness. Number one, that's the first step. You've got to become aware of those triggers. And a good way to do it is through journaling and just keeping track. And especially if there's a pattern, if there's just something that's happening time and time again, and you're noticing this pattern, I want you to also change your mindset around it. Instead of, maybe feeling guilty or bad about being triggered or looking at it as a bad thing, actually be grateful for it, because it's giving you a tremendous amount of information about what is actually happening. Okay, so start there with awareness, with journaling, looking for patterns. Okay, so that's the first step. Now, if you're looking for something, for just a little quick tool that you can do, because you know that managing triggers, understanding your fears, and healing those things is going to be a process, something that you can do sort of in the heat of the moment, or actually following the heat of the moment, or even before, maybe something happens, is you can do a little mantra. And it's just, peace begins with me. So you can just use your fingers, peace begins with me. And you can breathe while you're doing it. And it can just be a nice reminder that you have the source of power. You can be a transformer in your home. You can be like the coffee bean. It really does start with you. And like I said, I know it doesn't always feel like it, but you do have that ability to transform your home, to transform your relationship with your kid, to be an influence, to be a leader in your home. Let's see. So knowing your triggers, that's the first thing to your side of the equation. The second thing to your side of the equation is to practice reflective listening, because you're going to be able to gather information, you're going to be able to learn, you're going to be able to understand what is happening with your child. Because when you understand what is happening at a deeper level, why they might be misbehaving, you're going to be able to actually fix the problem versus like just putting a Band-Aid on it, right? Now, this doesn't mean that we just let our kids get away with things, right? While we're figuring things out. We still have to keep them safe, keep everybody else in the house safe, make sure that they're following the rules as much as possible. So we might need to do some, short-term strategies, whether it's using positive reinforcement, in order to sort of get through the day-to-day things. And a nice analogy to think about is like an arsonist, for example. So an arsonist might, for lack of a better comparison, I don't want to say your kid is an arsonist, but just for sake of comparison, an arsonist is going to be setting all these fires. So you're out there, you're putting out all these fires. It's very time consuming. It's exhausting. It's taking all of your energy. But ultimately what you want to do is you want to capture the arsonists, right? So that they don't continue to start fires. But just because you need to capture the arsonist doesn't mean that you're not going to continue to put out the fires. Does that make sense? So while you're trying to find the arsonist, while you're trying to get to the root of the problem, while you're trying to figure out what's actually happening, you're going to have to manage those, using your short-term strategies, whether it's positive reinforcement, using, maybe even some consequences of whatever that might look like for you in your home. All right, so this is the first part of the training, and today we talked about a couple of things that you can do for your side of the equation. And in the next training, I'm going to talk about after you have gathered some information about what your child might be experiencing, and you're going to be doing this through learning how to be responsive to your child rather than reactive, and then also learning how to gather information through practicing active listening. Then I'm going to give you some ideas of how you can actually figure out what is causing your child's misbehavior. All right, everyone, I hope this serves you. If you have any questions for me specifically, please feel free to reach out. I'm here to help you, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to our next training. Bye, everyone.